The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lavender fields, painting the rolling hills of Sonoma County in hues of violet and gold. I was supposed to be enjoying this. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, the culmination of a life well lived. But all I felt was a knot of anxiety tightening in my gut, a persistent ache that mirrored the dull throb behind my temples. They call them tension headaches. The doctors do. Stress-related, Mr. Davies. You need to slow down. Take it easy, easy for them to say. They weren't the ones facing the possibility that everything they'd built, everything they'd cherished, was crumbling around them. My name is Richard Davies. I'm 52 years old, and until a few weeks ago, I thought I had it all. A thriving winery, a beautiful home nestled in the heart of wine country, a loving wife, and 2 successful children. What more could a man ask for? Sarah, my eldest, had just given birth to our first grandchild, a beautiful little girl they named Olivia. It should have been a time of unbridled joy, a moment to celebrate the continuation of our family legacy. But the birth of Olivia had also cast a harsh light on something I'd been trying to ignore, a nagging feeling that something was amiss in my marriage to Eleanor. Sarah, bless her heart, is a stay-at-home mom, a choice that surprised everyone who knew her in college. She had a fire in her belly back then, a burning ambition to conquer Wall Street. But then she met David, her husband, a kind and steady architect 10 years her senior, and everything changed. They met while Sarah was studying abroad in Florence. After the birth of Olivia, Sarah decided that she needed to move closer to her mother, so they bought a house not even 5 blocks away. According to Sarah, Eleanor had developed a peculiar habit during her visits to see Olivia. Every Tuesday, she'd arrive bright and early, coo over the baby, and then, around midday, she'd disappear for a long walk. She'd return an hour or 2 later, flushed and breathless, claiming she'd been exploring the neighborhood. Sarah didn't think much of it at first, but then she noticed the way Eleanor avoided eye contact when she talked about her walks, the way she'd brush off any questions about where she'd been. And that's why I was sitting in my car, parked a discreet distance from Sarah's house, waiting to see where Eleanor's walk would lead her. My life with Eleanor had always felt like a fairy tale. We met at Stanford, both of us aspiring entrepreneurs with dreams of building something great. Eleanor had a quiet elegance about her, a grace and poise that captivated me from the moment I saw her. She was a runner, her body lithe and strong. I was smitten. After graduation, we poured all our energy into building the winery. It was a struggle at first, long hours, financial uncertainties, but we persevered. Eleanor had a knack for marketing, a way of connecting with people that drew them in. And I knew how to coax the best grapes from the land, how to turn them into wines that spoke of the sun-drenched hills of Sonoma. Over time, Davies Family Vineyards became a success. We expanded, built a tasting room, hired staff. Our wines won awards. Our brand became synonymous with quality and sophistication. We had made it. Eleanor emerged from Sarah's house precisely at noon, dressed in her usual running gear. A sleek black tracksuit, a pair of expensive Asics, and a baseball cap pulled low over her eyes. She stretched for a moment, her movements fluid and graceful, and then she set off at a brisk pace, heading towards the heart of downtown Healdsburg. I started the engine, keeping a safe distance behind her. My heart pounded in my chest, a mixture of dread and anticipation. What was I going to find? What secrets was Eleanor hiding? She jogged through the town square, past the trendy boutiques and gourmet restaurants, then turned down a quiet side street lined with Victorian houses. I slowed down, trying to blend in with the lunchtime traffic. Eleanor stopped in front of a quaint bed and breakfast called the Rose Cottage. It was a charming place, with a white picket fence, a lush garden, and a sign that read welcome. She didn't go inside. Instead, she waited on the sidewalk, glancing nervously at her watch. A few minutes later, a man emerged from the bed and breakfast. He was tall, handsome, with a shock of silver hair and a confident swagger. He wore a tailored suit and carried a leather briefcase. My blood ran cold. I recognized him instantly. His name was Charles Sterling. He was a renowned wine critic, a man whose words could make or break a winery. He was also an old flame of Eleanor's. They dated briefly in college, before I came along. Eleanor always dismissed him as a charming rogue, someone who was more interested in the pursuit than the prize. But there he was, standing on the sidewalk, his eyes locking with Eleanor's. They exchanged a few words. Then he took her hand and led her inside the Rose Cottage. I sat there, paralyzed, the truth crashing down on me like a tidal wave. It was happening. My worst fears were coming true. Eleanor was having an affair. The world tilted on its axis. The sun seemed to dim. The lavender fields lost their color. My carefully constructed reality was crumbling around me, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. I remembered a conversation I had with Sarah a few weeks earlier at Olivia's christening. Sarah had been teasing me about my graying hair, and I jokingly replied that at least I still had my marbles. "You and Mom are so lucky, Dad," she'd said, her eyes shining with happiness. "You found each other, and you've built this amazing life together. It's like something out of a fairy tale. A fairy tale. What a cruel joke." I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, watching the Rose Cottage, my mind racing. What should I do? Confront them? Storm inside and demand answers? Call the police? No. I couldn't do any of those things. Not yet. I needed to think, to plan, to figure out how to salvage what was left of my life. I drove back to the winery, the familiar landscape a blur of greens and browns. I went straight to my office, poured myself a generous glass of our Cabernet Sauvignon, and stared out the window, lost in thought. My marriage to Eleanor had always been built on trust, on mutual respect, on a shared vision. We had weathered storms together, celebrated triumphs, and supported each other through thick and thin. How could she do this to me? How could she betray everything we had built? I thought back to the early days of our relationship, the intense passion, the unwavering devotion. We were inseparable, two souls intertwined, destined to spend our lives together. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. The passion had cooled, the devotion had waned. We had grown complacent, content with the routine of daily life. We had stopped communicating, stopped connecting on a deeper level. And that, I realized, was my fault too. I had been so focused on building the winery, on achieving financial success, that I had neglected Eleanor. I had taken her for granted, assuming that she would always be there, always be supportive, always be loving. But Eleanor was a woman with her own needs, her own desires, her own dreams. And I had failed to see them, to acknowledge them, to nurture them. Perhaps Charles Sterling had seen those things, had offered her the attention and affection that I had failed to provide. The thought stung like a viper's bite. I spent the next few days in a daze, going through the motions of my daily routine, but feeling detached from everything. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on my work. I confided in no one, not even Sarah. I didn't want to burden her with my problems, especially with a newborn to care for. I continued to observe Eleanor, to watch her movements, to listen to her conversations. She seemed oblivious to my suspicions, continuing to act as if everything were normal. But I saw the subtle changes. The furtive glances at her phone, the secretive phone calls taken in hushed tones, the way she'd flinch when I touched her. I knew I couldn't go on living like this, in a state of constant anxiety and uncertainty. I needed to confront Eleanor, to demand the truth, to find out what was really going on. But I hesitated. I was afraid of what I might discover, afraid of shattering the illusion of my perfect life. I knew I couldn't just barge in and cause a scene. I wanted to wait and see if she would confess and come clean to me. Then, a week after seeing them at the Rose Cottage, Sarah called me, her voice tight with anger. "Dad," she said, "I don't know how to tell you this, but I saw Mom with Charles Sterling again today. They were having lunch at Bistro Jani. They were holding hands, Dad. They looked intimate. The words hit me like a physical blow. All my carefully constructed defenses crumbled. I felt a surge of anger, a white-hot rage that threatened to consume me. "I'm going to kill him," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Dad, no. Don't do anything stupid," Sarah pleaded. "Just talk to Mom. Find out what's going on. But please, don't let this destroy you." Her words snapped me back to reality. I took a deep breath, trying to regain control. "You're right, Sarah," I said. "I won't. I promise." Chapter 5. The Bitter End of a Vintage. That evening, I waited for Eleanor to come home. She arrived around 7 p.m., looking tired but relaxed. "How was your day, darling?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Fine," she replied, avoiding my gaze. "Just the usual. A few meetings, a tasting, some paperwork. And how was your walk?" I pressed, my voice betraying my anger. She stopped in her tracks, her eyes widening slightly. "My walk? It was fine. I explored some new trails. Did you happen to stumble upon the Rose Cottage by any chance?" Her face paled. She didn't say anything, but her silence spoke volumes. "I saw you, Eleanor," I said, my voice rising. "I saw you with Charles Sterling. Don't lie to me." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Richard, How long has this been going on?" I demanded. She hesitated, then blurted out, "A few months. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "A few months?" I repeated, incredulous. "You've been lying to me for months? How could you do this to me, to us?" "I'm sorry, Richard," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I know I've hurt you, but what? But you couldn't resist the charm of Charles Sterling. You couldn't resist the thrill of an affair." "It's not like that," she protested. "It's more complicated than that." "Complicated? You betrayed our marriage, Eleanor. You broke our vows. There's nothing complicated about that." I turned and walked away, unable to bear the sight of her tears. I went to the den and poured a drink, my hands shaking. That was the end of our marriage, right then and there. I saw no way to reconcile. The trust was gone. The love was gone. The future we had planned together was gone. I contacted a divorce attorney the next morning. He was ruthless, efficient, and expensive. I told him I wanted a clean break, no messy negotiations, no drawn-out legal battles. I didn't care about the money. I just wanted to be done with it, to put this chapter of my life behind me. The divorce was finalized within 6 months. Eleanor got half of our assets, including a significant portion of the winery. I kept the house, the vineyards, and the title of CEO. She moved to San Francisco, started a new life with Charles Sterling. I heard they were very happy. I tried to find some solace in my work, but it was no use. The winery felt empty without Eleanor. The passion was gone. The joy had been replaced by a dull ache of loneliness. I knew I couldn't go on living like this. I needed a change, a new beginning. I sold the winery a year later. I kept the house, but I rarely went there. I traveled the world, seeking new experiences, new adventures, new connections. I met many interesting people, saw many beautiful places, but I never found what I was looking for. The bitterness of my broken marriage lingered, a constant reminder of what I had lost. And as I sit here now, in my villa overlooking the Tuscan countryside, I can't help but wonder if I'll ever truly be happy again. I suspect that the bitter taste of Tuscan sun will forever be tainted by the shadows of my past.